You know, it's not often you get to interview possibly one of the most popular politicians in South Africa at the moment, the person who actually had a campaign to say that he should become president. The man who holds the keys to some people's futures because he's the Minister of Correctional Services, and a guy who should be getting ready for a whole lot more business thanks to the Madlanga Commission. So we are going to speak to Minister Pieter Groenewald in a minute, but before we get started, let's support our friends here at Pace Car Rental. They keep us on air. If you want to hire a car, they're giving you a present for their 20th anniversary. Rent a car, use our code SONA, and you'll get a discount on your next car hire. And while you're busy doing that, subscribe to the State of the Nation. It costs you nothing, and it helps us to reach more people. Admin done. Let's get on with the main event. Joining me today, Minister of Correctional Services, Dr. Pieter Groenewald. How are you? Welcome back.
Thank you, Mike. Yes, as you said, welcome back.
Yeah, it's been a while.
Yes, no, thank you for the opportunity. And let me immediately start and say, I've got nothing to do with the campaign.
Yes.
Nobody has ever asked me, are you available or anything?
Yeah.
So it spontaneously started.
Yes.
And yes, it is the campaign. But thank you. I always appreciate if I have the opportunity to be part of your show.
Now, tell me, it seemed like the part of the campaign it seemed to coincide with that wonderful video you did of the prisoners baking their own bread.
Yes.
The timing, everything, just the thing seemed to align at that point, and suddenly the whole thing got out there. And I understand that it wasn't inspired by you or the Freedom Front Plus or anything else. Do you ever work out who started this and why?
Yeah, well, you referred to the bread and the bakeries. That also contributed. But I really think it actually started, there was an inmate in Goodwood. It's a foreigner. And he actually put something on TikTok telling how wonderful it is in the prison. 3 meals a day and everything. And then I reacted. And after a week, they made another video of the same inmate. And then suddenly he said it is not nice at all in prisons. So it actually kicked off there, I think. And then, of course, there are other things I do. But let me say, I don't do these actions to try and see what publicity I get of it. I'm only doing my job.
Yes.
And when I became the minister, I said, one of my priorities is self-sufficiency. And to ensure self-sufficiency, the bakeries is a part of it. And it's true. To use that example, just the previous financial year, we saved 77 million with our bakeries. And let me take a specific example. We paid 24.50 for a loaf of bread on a tender. And I said, it's impossible. If you go to a supermarket or wherever, that's a top price.
Yeah, that's more expensive than Woolworths.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, what I found out is that this specific person who got the tender, he doesn't even have a bakery. And what he did, he subcontracted, say for 15 Rand a loaf of bread. So he was pocketing R1 million a month, doing nothing, just for getting the tender. And I stopped that. And we can produce a bread for 8 Rand, a loaf of bread. So at this moment, I can say that we are almost 97% self-sufficient when it comes to bread. Then, of course, other activities. We also, in terms of our farm products, our vegetables and all that sort of things. And I can say that also the previous financial year, we have saved about 125 million only on that. So when we talk about self-sufficiency, we saved just over 202 million Rand for the taxpayers.
Sure. So you see, that's why Pieter Groenewald that's why people are asking to make this man the president. But that sort of self-sufficiency, part of it is the money saving, and on behalf of taxpayers, that's wonderful to hear. But there's also a part of the rehabilitation process. It's also, you know, if we also agree that this isn't a Victorian age where people must go to prison so that they can have the worst possible time, there is a rehabilitation angle to this because they're not in there forever in most cases. It does help to give them something meaningful to do, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely true. And that's what makes, can I say, self-sufficiency so ideal when it comes to correctional services. Let's take the bakeries again. I mean, the inmates who work there, the offenders, after a time, after they served, we give them a certificate and we learn them some skills. So they can go out, they can start their own bakery if they want to. Even, for instance, if you look at other self-sufficiency projects, for instance, farming, we give them certificates. In fact, I can also say that we are in a Triple P, a private-public partnership with SAI organization when it comes to agriculture. And the good thing of that Triple P, we're in the process, I hope to finalize it before the end of this year, is that after the offenders completed their sentence, they go out of their way to see that they can get a job so that they get employed because they have certain networks. So that's the ideal.
Yes.
Because I always say, whether we like it or not, if a person, for instance, has been sentenced for 10 years imprisonment, after 10 years, he or she is going out. And we have a responsibility to see that we must do our utmost so that that person becomes an asset for South Africa, going back into the community, contribute to the good, and see that they can be rehabilitated. So it's very, very important.
Yeah.
And I also say, I personally love working in the garden and everything. It's a good thing.
It's a good thing, yeah. And of course, financially, it makes a lot more sense than to have that person come out a bigger criminal than they came in, and then they're going to come back to you at your expense in a couple of years' time.
No doubt, no doubt. But I must also say we have lots of problems and challenges. And as you said, well, the problem is you get, for instance, juveniles coming in. It's a remand detainee. And then they become hardened criminals. And if I can talk about that, that's part of my big problem, or can I say challenge, the overcrowding in our prisons. To give you an indication, we have a bed space for about 108,000 inmates. Now, the sentenced offenders at this moment is over 108,000. But then I come to the remand detainees awaiting trial. And they're around about, can we say, 66,000.
Wow.
In the end, we have a population of 174,000 inmates. When I became the minister, there were only 103,000 sentenced. So we talk about, in 2 years, an increase of 5,000. But the remand detainees are really the problem because you have to keep them separate. You don't have bed space for that. And with all the illegal immigration issues and the increase of crime combating and everything, there's an increase. But unfortunately, my space has been limited.
Before we get on to things like the foreigners that are in the prisons, when it comes to the bed space, are you building your own prisons?
Well, let me say that. The good news is that I have convinced the Minister for Finance when he announced the finance or the budget vote at the beginning of the year, and we're going to build 2 new prisons. We're going to accommodate, say, around about 8,000 new bed spaces. But we all know that that takes time. It's been announced, we're in the process, but it will take 3-4 years before we are there. There are certain projects where we try to upgrade existing centers, where in the end we can create another 20,000 bed spaces, but we don't have the budget for that. So I am in a process to see that I can convince them for at least the upgrading, because it's not that you have to go through a whole complete new process of extending certain facilities. It's much easier to try to get that money so that we can see in a short time can create another 20,000 bed spaces.
So yeah, it's a permanent challenge there. You mentioned foreigners, and I know a lot of people will be asking this question because it's been so topical at the moment. Where do we sit with the foreign component inside of our prisons?
Well, the latest statistics as of the 14th of this month, of July, we have just over 28,000 foreigners. Now, that includes remand detainees as well as sentence foreigners. And it's about half-half. 14,000 remand detainees and, say, 14,000 sentence foreigners. Now, I said when I became the minister also that I want to send them back to their country of origin. Now, the good news is that just on Friday, I signed a memorandum of understanding with Namibia for interstate transfer of prisoners, offenders. We will send the Namibians from us to them and South Africans from them to us. This is the second MOU. We also, about in May this month, I also concluded a memorandum of agreement with Botswana. In the pipeline now, the next priority is with Zimbabwe.
Well, that's the big fish. Eh?
That's a big fish. I mean, if you look at the foreign inmates, Zimbabwe is at the top. There are about, if you take sentence offenders, about 4,500 Zimbabweans. And then you go to Mozambique. There are about 3,500 in our facilities. Then you go to Lesotho. They've just about 2,300. And then it's Malawi. Malawi, they have about 2,000 inmates. So if you can do that, then you can reduce it. But the aim is to get all the SADC countries at least. So many people think, for instance, that Nigeria, we have a lot of Nigerians. We don't. We have less than 300 of them. But in the end, I would like to have all those countries to have memorandums of understanding. Sure. But we must have the perspective, because remember, we're going to receive our South Africans.
Back,
But at least, because it's, if you make the calculations, at present, it's a cost to company.
Yes.
It is 482 Rand per day, per offender. So if you look at the foreigners, it's about almost 12 million per day. So at least if we get the others back, we will say, well, we're spending our taxpayers' money on our own criminals, if I can put it that way.
Yeah, let's talk about those remand. The remand numbers is what's hurting your operation so badly. Is this now a failure of the criminal justice system, that, or is it just the sort of the problem that we have in our society, that people can't, that by remand, I presume what you're talking about there is people that have been charged with stuff. They haven't been able to post bail. They can't get out of it, so they have to wait at your pleasure while the whole system grinds its way through, in some cases for a very long time.
There's no doubt that it's a failure of the criminal justice system. As you said, awaiting trial. I have about 4 awaiting trial members or remand detainees waiting for more than 10 years.
No.
For just to complete the whole, can I say, justice part in our courts. So that's a huge problem. Of course, I spoke to my colleague, the Minister of Justice, but we know there's also an overload on justice, a burden to get all the cases solved. And I know that I was quite controversial at one stage when I said, maybe we must look, and I specifically said when it comes to juveniles. I have about, say, 3,000 juveniles. They couldn't pay a bail of R1,000 and less. So I said, sometimes you get this petty crime, stealing a shirt in a shop or something like that. And I said, we must start the discussion on corporal punishment, but not like it was in the past that you phone the police, they come and get the guy and give him corporal punishment. It must become part of a sentencing of our courts. Give them a choice. Do you want 6 of the best, or do you want to go to jail? I think far the majority will go for that. And I know the human rights people say to me, yeah, but it's inhumane and everything. And I said, well, I want to tell you, if you know what the situation is in our centers, it's more inhumane to put that juvenile in an overcrowded cell and everything that happens there. That's inhumane. So there is also a bail fund started. And I must applaud the previous Inspector Judge for Correctional Services, Judge Cameron. They started this bail fund with private donations, not taxpayers' money, so that they can see these people who couldn't afford a bail of R1,000 and less. Just to give, we even have a case where the person couldn't afford bail of R100, but it is costing the taxpayers 438 or 482 Rand per day. So we're working on those issues, matters, to see how we can solve it. But the solution in the end is that, yes, we must upgrade the criminal justice system. And with that, I also want to say, because that brings us to the parolees, I'm working hard to get electronic bans, of bracelets, let me put it that way, because then I can more easily put people on parole, because you can monitor them all the time. And you get very sophisticated monitoring bracelets. It will even tell you if the person is using alcohol or drugs and all that sort of thing. And it's a standard, can I say, precondition when you go on parole, that you're not allowed, for instance, to use alcohol. So the moment we have that, then we can send more people on parole. Because for me, reoffending is a very, very serious and important manner. We have to fight crime by ensuring that we limit our reoffending. But unfortunately, it's costing quite a lot of money. And let me say, for the last 6 years, the budget for correctional services had been cut for almost 12 billion Rand. So it's a huge challenge, but we will continue with that.
Now, you may need some of that budget back, because we talk about the criminal justice system, and nothing has jolted the criminal justice system like us seeing the criminal justice system at work, like in the Madlanga Commission.
Exactly. That's true.
That is shining, and the problems associated with it. It's not just the commission itself. It's the fact that it looks like it's become clear that there's a massive problem with policing, and you're downstream from all of that, right? Bad policing, bad court system, bad everything, and you eventually sit with the problem. But now the Madlanga Commission taking place, is this going to work in a bizarre way to help you? Because this might just give that kick in the pants that the criminal justice system has needed, that was hollowed out. We know it was hollowed out. But does this change things?
Let me answer you this way. You're asking whether it's going to help me. Yes and no. Yes, because I will ensure that the criminal justice system as such will more, can I say, ensure that they spend enough time and have enough people to ensure that people get sentenced. But the other thing, and that's where we get no, is that they're all going to end up in our facilities.
Yeah.
And I don't have the space. The other day, the Minister of Police said to me, he said, colleague, I just want to say to you, we're working very, very hard to increase your problem of overcrowding. So that's a yes and a no. But from an objective point of view, I always said, even before I became the minister, all the years, even when I was still the member of parliament, an ordinary member of parliament, and even the leader of the Freedom Front Plus, I said the crime situation and the problem in South Africa is our criminal justice system. They failed us. I mean, if you go and look at statistics, you will find that a criminal, if you take all the reported charges and crimes and everything, and the successful, can I say, sentencing of people, a criminal has almost a 90% of getting away with crime. They just couldn't handle it. So criminals, they knew that they can commit crime, and the chances are very good that they will not end up in our prisons. And if you sharpen that up, and if I refer to the criminal justice system, I include correctional services as part of it, because for me there are three main departments. Correctional service, but let's start. It's the police, then the Justice Department, and of course then the Correctional Services Department. And let's hope, and I think that's a very good thing of the Madlanga Commission. We see that there are a couple of arrests of people. I first want to see the final verdict. What is going to happen with that?
Now, just for the people that are watching, so let's just say the Madlanga Commission, we've already seen a couple of people appear in court. And just to be clear on how this process works, let's just say there are a couple of convictions and high-profile ones, people whose names we know. What then becomes of them? You know, we saw the outrageous cases of Schabir Shaik, Jacob Zuma, where they go and they sit in a hospital bed and then they leave 6 months later. What actually happens? What is the plan with a very high-profile prisoner?
You refer to the Schabir Shaik and everything like that. And let me say, a lot of people ask me, why don't I bring him back? The fact of the matter is he's completed his sentence. I can't bring him back. And I'm not arrogant when I say that. But as long as I'm the Minister for Correctional Services, those high-profile people, they must know and they must get the message. They will be dealt with as ordinary, normal inmates. There will be no special treatment for them. They will find out that that is the way it's going to be. Because why do they have to get special treatment? Depending on what the sentence is. Whether they're going to be in a maximum facility or not, that will depend on them. And if, for instance, if they are sentenced for life, can I say, and that brings me to parole, for instance. Now, people must understand, in terms of legislation, we call them lifers, people who were sentenced for life. The minister approves or rejects an application for parole, but only when it comes to lifers. Other people, you have parole boards, and they determine whether they can go on parole or not. And I've mentioned the reoffending rate in South Africa. I'm very strict when I decide on a parole application for lifers, and I look at what is the risk of reoffending. Now, you have a category of low, can you say moderate or high. Now, even if the file determines that it is low to moderate, I do not approve parole for that specific application, because I see that I have a responsibility towards the people of South Africa, the community, to ensure that if a lifer goes on parole, that he or she does not easily reoffend. I mean, they didn't give a life or received a life sentence for nothing. They are dangerous people. And let I also say, because there are misconceptions about life, before October 24, life sentence actually meant 25 years in prison. But after 1st October of 2004, it has changed. Life now means life. And you can only get or qualify or become eligible for parole after 25 years that you have served. And then you're only eligible. It doesn't mean you are entitled to go on parole.
Okay, so let's just talk about some of the observations. Now, you've been in this position now for a while. By now, you've got quite familiar. What is the state of gangs in jail? Because that seems to be has been in the past a massive problem. Still a massive problem?
It's still a problem. I won't say a massive one because we acted strictly. We increased our rates. And just to give you an indication, the 24, can I actually say 23-24 financial year, there were less than 400 raids. And our last previous financial year, 25-26, it has been increased to more than 1,400. So there was a 200% increase in raids. We've confiscated in that one financial year 37,500 cell phones. So it is still a problem, specifically in the Western Cape. We're working hard on that, and I said that we must start now, that I don't want any cell phones in our facilities, and that includes the officials, because there are actually 3 ways cell phones get into our facilities. It is, remember, remand detainees, when they go to court, the police come and fetch them, take them to court and bring them back. So that's one way where they get the phones. Yes, it's still a responsibility of correctional services officials to ensure that they are properly searched before they get back. But that's where corruption is. The other way is by visitors. That also happens. And then, of course, the third one is the officials themselves. Now, I've made a directive, or I've given a directive, even officials, if they go into the facility, they can leave their cell phones at reception, and then they can do their job. Because, yes, people talk about blocking instruments, signal blockers, and all that sort of thing. It's cost quite a lot of money. And part of that problem always was that you have to get a license for that, because take, for instance, Goodwood Prison in Western Cape, right next to the N1. If you block signals there, you have a possibility that besides the community, if there's an accident, there's no signals. Now, you do get sophisticated signal blockers that you can really say a specific area like a cell. You can do that, but it's very, very expensive. It's going to take too long. And what we do is now, I said, I want no cell phones in there. And if an official is caught with a cell phone, he or she will be disciplined.
Let's talk about the officials, Peter, because obviously that is always, that's the thing that must keep you up at night, is the officials themselves colluding with the prisoners. And it must be kind of difficult. Many years must wear you down as an official. Soon enough, you find yourself doing stuff that you wouldn't have done when quite soon after you qualified to become a prison officer. How bad is the problem of corruption amongst your officials? How bad is, what is the state of play when it comes to the officials and their behavior?
Let me immediately say that 98% of the personnel or the employees of correctional services are hardworking, honest people with integrity. They want to do a good job. You have to say around about 2%. But it's not easy to identify them. You must actually catch them red-handed. I, for instance, had a situation where I brought a visit to a prison, and we found a cell phone. And to make a long story short, he said that he got it at the court. But if you look at the model of, and I asked him, but when last were you at the court? No, you said it's 3 years ago. But the model of the cell phone is not less than a year. So it's not. So it must be an official. But then if you want to ensure that such an official pay the price, and the price is you are dismissed, you have to get the evidence. And they will never admit who it was. So it's very difficult. It's frustrating. I understand. There must be labor laws and all that sort of thing. But the process is too long. I can say that the previous financial year, 187 officials were actually dismissed, who was involved in contraband. So contraband is not only cell phones, it's some other stuff as well, drugs and everything. So we're working on it. And I hope, and it will start happening. When I became the minister, I said, there are 3 things I'm looking at. Firstly, the most valuable asset of correctional services are the employees. It's the most valuable. If you don't have good officials, then you won't succeed. The second thing is that I believe in discipline. And the third thing is there must be consequences. Now, it's not the matter of consequences that you will immediately lose your work or your job. It depends what the offense is that you committed. But you must know that if you committed something wrong, you will carry the consequences. And I can give you an example. At a prison, I went there, unannounced visit. The telephone booth at 6 telephones. Now, I must also say, inmates do have the permission to phone their relatives or friends or whatever the case may be, but through a specific system of a telephone booth. And I asked the prison head, are those phones, are they working? And he said, yes. And I said, all of them? And he said, yes. And I said, lock up it. And I went, and only 2 of the 6 worked. The next morning, he was disciplined because he lied to me. Yes, I know it's not his fault that they don't work, but don't lie to me. So there is consequence. At that same situation, I had an official came to me and said, Minister, please come and look here where the visitors are. None of those phones are working. So when a visitor or when an inmate receives a visit, they can just look to each other through a thick piece of glass. They can't communicate. And I actually wrote a letter there and praised him for his honesty. And I also said, if I can find out that there is now, can I say, action against this official, whoever does that will pay a price. So you have to be strict. You must remember that the area we're working in is very strict, a security area. It is also, for instance, the police, the defense force, and correctional services officials. They retire at the age of 60 because they're part of the crime system, only crime system, can I say, the security environment. So it's a dangerous work to do, especially the wardens. And therefore, I say that you have to be strict. I started already. I brought back some insignia. And for instance, they start saluting each other again because that's discipline. You have to have respect for the person. Maybe you don't like the person who's carrying the rank, but you must have respect. I also, for instance, started bringing back service medals. This year alone, I already gave 187 officials and decorated them with gold medals, service medals for 40 years or more. Majority of them are leaving the service now, unfortunately, and losing quite a lot of experience and all that sort of things. But we are giving people or employees service medals for 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, and 40 years. Because that is to uplift the morale and all that sort of things. So yes, I recognize them, but they must understand discipline and consequences.
Is the pipeline okay? I mean, I know one of the sad advantages of being in South Africa is that you probably don't have a problem hiring new people because people are desperate for jobs. But you have to train them.
Yes.
Do you train them, or does somebody else? Does the correctional services train correctional services officers, or is it done through the police, or how does it work?
No, we do it ourselves. In fact, we have a college, training college, just outside Pretoria, and they go there. And you're quite right. If you look at the employment crisis in South Africa, we are in a process by the end of, say, 2030, that we can employ 12 to 13,000 new people. When we put out an advertisement, we received 1.2 million applications. And of course, that's a huge administration to go through everything. The first group, it's about just over 2,000, are completing now, and then they will go into the system. So then next year we'll start with another group. So we will continue with that. But we train itself. And of course, the doctrines are a bit different. But when it's discipline, it's discipline. You have your ESTs, like they say, and they call it the emergency support team. They get more special training. But in that training, people are learned about criminality, learn about, for instance, gangs, the way gangs operate. They must go through all those courses. But in the end, there's only one school to ensure that you have top people, and that is the experience.
Sure.
You can do a lot of, can I say, theoretical issues, but then they must go through the system. And that's why I say I'm losing quite a lot of very experienced people because of the new, can I say, opportunity that people can go on early retirement.
So now, if you were granted 5 billion rand in extra budget tomorrow, where would it be best spent in correctional services?
Firstly, I would get the electronic bracelets. That's first, because with that I can reduce quite a lot of problems. The second thing I will do is, of course, to ensure that we boost our self-sufficiency. The third thing I will do, if there's money left, I will upgrade certain facilities. As I said, we received more than 2 billion now for building 2 facilities. The one is going to be built in Nigel, and the other one is in Kirkwood in Eastern Cape. And the reason for that is we have the land. So we don't have to go through a process when it comes to buying land or something like that. So that's what I would do with the 5 billion, but that's a small change.
Yeah. So now, you have obviously got clearly made a difference. It's come through. We see that it seems like statistically you would know better than I. It seems like there's fewer escapes. We haven't had these high-profile things. That must be your own personal nightmares to hear about some person escaping. What has been the biggest failure in your time as Correctional Services Minister?
Well, if you say failure, the question is it a failure, or is it a matter of you are confronted with the facts? I mean, space is space.
Yeah.
That's a fact. It's very difficult to say big failure because, and it's not that I want to shy away from anything. I always say I'm open to criticism. But as you've mentioned, the escapes. If someone, we had a couple of escapes, but we brought it down under 5 in a financial year. Wow. And then they we find them within 3-4 days maximum. And we have very good cooperation from the community. Referring to, for instance, Thabo Bester, from the 1st of July, that private facility in Bloemfontein is now part of Correctional Services. We took it over because the contract expired by the 30th of June. So, and that's it's a maximum facility. So we have our people there. But again, if you look at Thabo Bester, and I went there, and they was thoroughly explained how he escaped. I mean, 7 officials at this moment are charged criminally for the involvement of the escape. Escape very seldom takes place without an official somewhere cooperating.
Yeah.
Most from our escapes, well, I want to say actually all of them at this stage, happens at 2 places. When they go to court, and as I said, the police pick them up, take them to court, and then they escape. The other one is in our agricultural section, because you have to take them out, and it's easy to hide, say, behind a stack of whatever the case may be. But still, it's official, because each and every official must ensure, I took 10 people to go and work. Now we're going back. Why are there only 9? So those are, can I say,
the areas
where we get this problem.
Just as a matter of interest, your self-sufficiency program, you mentioned the bread and the agriculture. Just a question here. Is that work voluntary? Do you know what I mean? Like, because I presume you have, as we saw in the videos, there's some people really enthusiastic, really getting the most out of it. Humans are made differently, but I couldn't help when I was watching that thinking that there must be somebody that refused to get out of his bed. What is the arrangement, if I could put it that way?
When it comes to sentence, people, it's not voluntary.
Okay.
It's part of the legislation. The law provides us with the power to say that you must get involved.
Okay.
But when it comes to the remand detainees, awaiting trial, then it's more voluntary, because they are not sentenced yet, and we know the principle: innocent until proved guilty, or whatever the case may be.
Yeah. Okay. So now I just want to switch tack a little bit over here, because we've spoken a lot about your job as Minister of Correctional Services. When you came into the GNU, you were leader of the Freedom Front Plus. You've handed that over to Corne Mulder, but you are still a minister in the Government of National Unity. And let's put it this way, the Government of National Unity may have stabilized South Africa, but it's hardly been a glowing success when we look at no economic growth and record unemployment and seemingly a lack of leadership. What is going on within the Government of National Unity that seems to not be working, in that you've got these pockets where things have improved, but the economy is not going. We still have the president talking as if he's running another country. You've got a ringside seat. What can you share with us before we...
I think the question is, a lot of people ask, is the Government of National Unity a success or not?
Yes.
Right. I say, to answer that, you must ask yourself, what was the situation before the GNU? And let me give an example. After the GNU was formed, the first budget vote speech did not take place because of the GNU. And it is because of the GNU that it did not take place, because I wanted the minister, and let me explain, the Minister of Finance, the people don't know it, but he's not accountable to, actually, can you say, anybody. The Constitution says he's independent. He must make decisions based on economic principles. Yes, he is accountable to Parliament because his budget must be approved by Parliament, but he's not accountable to Cabinet. Of course, he will speak to the President, because he can't say, well, Mr. President, I'm not accountable to you. And he said, no, it's fine. And the next morning when he wakes up, he finds out he's not the Minister of Finance anymore, because it's a prerogative of the President. So what happened in the past? The minister came, yes, with the President, said, this is what we're going to say. And in politics, it works like this. If the leader has spoken, you accept it. So for the first time now, and I see it more and more in cabinet meetings, that ANC ministers are coming forward, giving different views, even criticize certain issues and matters that is taking place. And I think that's a good thing.
Mm.
But I say the best thing of the GNU is, remember that Zuma said that the ANC will rule until Jesus comes.
Mm.
And the people of South Africa, they took a decision to say, we're not going to allow it.
Mm.
They brought the change in 2024 election. And now I say, and let me also say, on that budget, some of the best arguments, and I mentioned his name, that's Minister Ramakgopa from Electricity, had some of the best arguments not to increase the VAT with 2%. Now they're coming up forward. So yes, that's change.
Mm.
And of course, there are some issues.
Yes.
Let's take, for instance, international relations. But now the opportunity is there that President Ramaphosa must now go back to the clearing, they call it the clearing mechanism of political parties who is part of the GNU, where all the leaders of those parties are. And they must insist that they have these meetings where they then can say, this is what we want. It is an improvement. And before the election, I said many times, we must remember that coalition is going to be something new for the electorate of South Africa. It's going to be a learning curve, not only for leaders, but also for the electorate, because we're not used to that.
Mm.
And there is improvement. There was a turnaround when it came to the economy. As you said, yes, it's growing too slow, but we must also be honest that the whole world has a problem at the moment. We talk about the war in the Middle East and everything like that. That's true. But there was a turn. If you look at the financial gradings from Standard & Poor and all those people, that is an improvement. Now, we know the cliche, you don't turn an oil tanker in a couple of days. It will take time. And my appeal to the electorate is, you started the change. Keep on doing that. Go and ensure that you vote and that you, well, of course, vote for the opposition parties. Anyone, I don't care who you vote for, but go and vote because our people are staying away. And I want to put emphasis on it. The electorate, the people of South Africa started the change. Now let's continue making it stronger and that we ensure that we have proper change in South Africa.
I want to just throw one last question at you, and that is that some of the legislation was almost, you could use the word, spitefully done. Done in many ways to no benefit of the country. In fact, in many cases to the detriment of the country. It was done either as a desperate ploy to influence the 2024 election or just in the aftermath of the election where acts were passed and so on. Has there been any discussion about some of these, economic killer legislations that were passed around there that I know sat very uncomfortably with a party like the Freedom Front Plus?
Yeah. Well, firstly, let's use the examples. Many people refer to the expropriation without compensation. The fact of, and let's take the basic education. Now, what the people must remember, those, when they were still bills, were passed by Parliament before the election. And there are certain terms in the Constitution where the President must approve and sign it into acts. So if you say they did it deliberately, there's no doubt that they did it deliberately. I personally wrote about 2-3 letters to the President and requested him, specifically on the expropriation without compensation, refer it to the Constitutional Court because you have the authority to do that. Let they give us a verdict on it. Now, we know what happened there. It is in the Constitutional Court. If you take the National Health Assurance situation, of course they did it for propaganda for the election. But that is still ongoing. If you refer, for instance, to certain, when it comes to the economy, there are amendment bills on its way. And yes, you can't change everything, but let me give one example. Local government is in chaos. And when it comes, for instance, with the service delivery, now there is a process. One of these days, the bill will be publicized. That, for instance, that monies paid for water and electricity must be ring-fenced, so that local governments can use that money only for paying the bills. Now, that's a huge step forward. What they do is they get the service monies, but they use it for different things, and the wrong things, for corruption. Now, if it is a ring fence, then they can only use it for that. That will be an improvement, to give you one example. But there is improvement. A couple of, if people go and look on the website of Parliament, they will see there are many bills now coming up. And it is, as far as I'm concerned, it is an improvement on the present situation before the amendments.
Local government elections coming up. You're still very senior within the Freedom Front Plus as a former leader. You're not going to be leading this campaign as such as the leader of the party, but with your Freedom Front Plus hat on, what are you looking forward to in November at the local government elections?
Yes, I am still involved, but not that much.
Yeah.
So it will be difficult to make a prediction. What we see from, well, the campaign which I was not consulted with, I can say that our offices, we are overwhelmed, specifically from people joining the Freedom Front Plus. So it looks very good. But I always say that in the end, it depends whether people are going to vote. You get people, they join a political party, but on election day, they say, oh, no, I don't think I'm going to vote. And that's where the problem lies. Our people must come forward, but I think that the Freedom Front Plus is going to do good. So let's see what's going to happen.
Pieter Groenewald, it's been fantastic speaking to you. Really, thank you so much for coming through. It's really excellent to hear about everything that you're doing and to answer so candidly. Thank you so much for coming through. To everybody that's out there, if you like the idea of Pieter Groenewald for president, well, maybe we should consider, let's start at local government level first, okay? We can't vote for the president just yet. But, there are other parties out there that are doing great work, and I think Dr. Pieter Groenewald has done superb work at the Ministry of Correctional Services. And if that's the way, these are the kind of civil public servants that we need. So thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you to everybody that watched us. Remember, support Pace Car Rental, subscribe to the State of the Nation. Thank you for joining us today.